After I returned to the States, finished college, learned to fly airplanes at commercial multi-engine ratings, instrument ratings, and instructor ratings, at all the ratings I could possibly get, basic instrument, advanced ground instructor ratings. And then in 1972, I went to work flying airplanes for the U.S. Customs Service. And a couple of years later, got transferred over to DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and flew planes for them until about 15 years later. A couple of interesting items happened. One thing about flying airplanes, it was in demand in both Customs and the DEA. Back at this time, drug smugglers really liked pilots and their airplanes because it was one means to get their shipment of drugs back to the United States across the border. So we were in demand. So I was working undercover all the time. And it was a weekly thing, almost a weekly thing. And occasionally things got a little heated. On one occasion, I'll tell you about two quick occasions here. One occasion, I met with a group of people that I had previously arrested. I didn't know at the time I was going to meet them that I had previously arrested this particular guy. And we met him in a farmhouse out in the country, and it really didn't have much for surveillance covered. And met this guy. I knew who he was when I saw him. He looked at me and he says, "You look familiar." And since I had arrested him previously, I knew where he had been previously, where he had lived, which was Eugene, Oregon. And I mentioned, "Well, I lived in Eugene, Oregon for a while." And he says, "That must be where I know you from." And so we commenced the deal, and I left in a hurry. And a couple of days later, we met as scheduled, and he came to the airport and got on the plane, getting ready to go, at which time he was arrested. And also at which time he said, I knew you from someplace." And the second incident similar to that, sitting in a bar at a restaurant bar, half a dozen of us were sitting around the table. Unwitting informant had me there to meet the money guy that was going to pay for the operations. And this guy came in, and right away, I knew who he was too. And he looked over the table and he pointed, there's six of us at the table about, and he looked at the people at the table and he pointed to one guy and he says, "I don't know you, I know you, I know you, I don't know you, I don't," and then he pointed his finger at me and he says, "And you're a DEA agent." And that ended that case. So a place filled with cops, and we all went home. I flew an aircraft down to Barranquilla, Colombia, South America. Met some bandits there. We set up the plan. I would taxi my aircraft down to the departure end of the runway at Barranquilla, and they would, at 3 a.m., I would shut down the engine, they would load the aircraft with drugs, and then I would take off back to the States. And that's exactly what happened. As I taxied down, I talked to my counterpart down there, who told me that he had talked to his people, the DOS, the Colombian police, and informed them on several occasions not to shoot at the airplane. That was the good guy. That would be me. And so I parked the airplane do a quick run up. I parked the airplane, shut the engine down, and at which time the Colombian smugglers started loading it up with drugs. I bent over and tied the lanyard that I had previously set on the road that would activate a couple of flares when I took off. The Colombians filled the airplane about 3/4 full, and at which point I jumped into the cockpit, fired it up, and took off. To their surprise, that was also the signal to arrest. As I raced down the runway, I could hear shots being fired, and I puckered up a little bit and kept right on trucking and pulled up the landing gear and cleared the runway and flaps and headed for Jamaica to refuel. Got about halfway to Jamaica and ran into the most horrendous tropical storm. I couldn't get through, almost lost, felt like I was about to lose the wing of an aircraft, so I turned around and went back to Barranquilla and landed. It was sunup now, and I'm not on a flight plan, and the Colombians aren't expecting this plane, and of course they're very security conscious. I landed, taxied in, and parked the plane, and here comes their security. And of course, they see a plane full of drugs. Can't be explained why I'm there with a plane full of drugs. So we go. I get marched into the office, and I tell them that I was a secret agent, a Hunte Secreto U.S. Customs, and it was enough that get them across that, well, for the action that happened the night before, they probably thought, well, maybe there is something to it, but let me make a phone call. I got hold of my counterpart, told him what happened weather-wise, and he said he'd be right out to the airport. And he, about 10 minutes later, some Colombian honcho came walking through the door with his entourage behind him, and all the guys that were in the office there, keeping control of me. All of a sudden, they stood at attention and backed up. The guy approached me, big smile on his face, called me by name. He had mentioned something about my running into weather, so I knew we were in good hands now. We talked for a while, and then my counterpart shows up, and the three of us go have breakfast. And then the next day, I fly off to San Francisco. This case is over. Of course, the Colombians unloaded the drugs. It was over. And flew back to San Francisco. That was the end of it. I'll tell you about one more case, and that's it. I was stationed in Minneapolis at the time. From Minneapolis, I got called to fly, all over the country and sometimes out of the country. But anyway, Atlanta office called. They had a case going. It was a job to fly 750 pounds of cocaine out of Colombia, or this organized crime group out of New York and Miami. Anyway, along with it, it was an informant involved. So along with him, we flew down to Colombia, and made the approach to the airport. Landed. Shut down an engine, and the Colombians loaded the aircraft with the 750 pounds of cocaine. We took off and head back to landed in Cuba at the Guantanamo Naval Station there to refuel, and then moved on back to Atlanta, Georgia. The case was explained more clearly in a news story, and I'll play that for you right now.
But this is our lead story. For weeks, Eyewitness News has been following a highly secret federal drug investigation codenamed Operation Southern Comfort. Centered here in Atlanta, this international probe lasted more than 2 years, and it involved dangerous undercover missions. Agents suspect that tons of cocaine worth billions of dollars were regularly shipped into the U.S.
Indictment measured by the amount of drugs involved means that we have uncovered and broken the largest cocaine trafficking ring in the history of this country.
In all, 4 separate indictments were issued around the country, naming 53 defendants. The cities involved: Atlanta, Miami, Little Rock, and Los Angeles. The Atlanta indictment is central. It names 30 individuals, including prominent citizens of Colombia and the Bahamas. It includes 55 counts, charging people with a drug smuggling conspiracy and racketeering. At the center of the operations is a former Atlanta bail bondsman named Harold Rosenthal.
He's also charged with an offense continuing criminal enterprise. Shorthand, that's a drug kingpin statute, and it's a statute that is used when we can make a case at the highest level of drug trafficking in this country.
Rosenthal is already in prison on another drug charge, and you're going to hear more about him in a moment when I take you inside Southern Comfort, that secret investigation that resulted in today's indictments.
Forrest, this investigation, which officially began in June 1982, chronicles over a year of alleged drug smuggling operations into our country. The government alleges that those indicted are responsible for bringing up to $3.8 billion worth of cocaine into this country. The government says it has recovered 2,600 pounds of the estimated 5 tons brought to the United States.
Pam, it is former Atlantan Harold Rosenthal, this man that officials say was at the heart of the smuggling operations. Operation Southern Comfort began when agents from the Drug Enforcement Administration uncovered this escaped felon allegedly running cocaine operations of unbelievable size. And from that discovery until now, the agents have been carefully and dangerously tracing Rosenthal's trail. Rosenthal is now in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. serving 15 years on another drug conspiracy charge. But until just recently, he was in Colombia and the Bahamas, allegedly directing the smuggling operations as the transportation expert.
Part of the evidence against Rosenthal comes from a remarkable undercover mission. After some negotiations, the Rosenthal organization allegedly turned over about $1.3 million as front money for a smuggling scheme. The drug agents involved then used that money to buy an $800,000 airplane, a house in Paulding County, and some cars.
With the newly purchased plane, a Merlin III like this one, wired for sound, an informant and an undercover DEA agent flew to Colombia to pick up a load of cocaine. Agents in Atlanta monitored the transmissions, and unknown to them, so did a news agency. Eyewitness News has obtained an audio recording of the actual drug deal.
Going in.
The DEA agent brings the plane down on a tiny landing strip.
Touchdown.
755 pounds of cocaine are loaded, 12 to 15 bags, with Rosenthal allegedly there helping.
He looks good, pistoleros, and pistoleros. Everything's looking good. And 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. One very nervous pistolero.
And then the takeoff, and a big problem. The agent has armed Colombian drug smugglers behind him, a dangerously short runway ahead, and an overloaded airplane with an overheated engine. He could easily crash into the trees at the end of the strip.
Let's go. Let's get the hell out of here. You got the trucks, both trucks out? Trucks coming up. Little high to the left. Little high to the left. Get up. Hold the flat. 100, 110, 120, 120. Up, they're coming. Miller time.
They make it, and safely away from the smugglers, the agent stays in radio contact with his colleagues back here. He confirms they are carrying cocaine.
The two men flew back here to Atlanta, and this is where they put their smuggler's hats back on. They drove the coke to the Paulding County house, allegedly giving it to two members of an organized crime family. The coke was then separated into two cars, vehicles the agents did not dare let out of their sight. Using ground and air surveillance, they had at least 60 people keep an eye on the cocaine as it was taken to Fort Lauderdale. And that is where the agents made their bust.
This is an image of me stepping off the airplane, being greeted by the case agent and SAC, the agent in charge of the office. And these are the bags of cocaine. After the case was completed, the U.S. Attorney wrote up a synopsis of all the events that happened, including the part about the myself and the undercover informant involved in the case, and talked about how we finally flew to Colombia to pick up the load of cocaine. According to the attorney's report, the main crook Rosenthal wanted the informant to find out who caused the problems, and they identified us, Leonard, me, as the person that caused all the problems, and that Ship, the informant, told the main crook that they had taken care of Leonard and had him executed by a poisonous snake. That's in this report that you can see above. Then there was a funeral. And on May 26, 1983, at approximately 2 p.m., a funeral for Michael Leonard took place at the Paulding Memorial Garden Cemetery in Hiram, Georgia. Reverend Robert White of Dallas, Georgia, officiated the ceremony. Blah, blah, blah. Clark Funeral Home, Dallas, Georgia, conducted the burial services. Leonard's death was reported in the Paulding County local newspaper. This is the Merlin III. And this is the me at the controls of the Merlin III. And this is what the cockpit looks like. Photo is a little out of focus, but most of the photos I show it here, are out of focus. You know, I've done a lot of things over the last 40 or 50 years. And you can tell the world is such a much better place than when I started. I think the next time I graduate from high school, I'm just going to go down to Waterloo and get a job making tractors at John Deere's.